Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Advocate, the podcast of the Academy of Catholic Thought and Imagination. And I am José García Moreno, and I'm really happy today because I have some dear friends with me here. And we're going to talk about something that is really very close to my heart and to, I guess, to a lot of people's hearts, spirituality and music, and how these two important paths cross to conform our humanity. With me, I want to welcome Kim Harris, Associate Professor of African American Thought at the Theological Studies Department. She teaches courses in Black liberation. She's a liturgist, a composer, a recording artist. He lectures on the music of the Black Catholic experience. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Kim. We have John Flaherty, Special Assistant to the Senior Vice President. He is involved in music and educational ministry for over 45 years. As educator, elementary school principal, I didn't know that one, and music director and director of choral activities. Am I missing something because you have a long career of accomplishments?
Husband and father, that's it.
And John Sebastian is here with us, Senior Vice President. He has a PhD in Medieval Studies at Cornell University and an MA from Georgetown. And I know that Chaucer is one of his favorite authors. Am I correct with that?
That all sounds great. Thanks,
Excellent.
Jose.
Thank you so much. So, the style of acting is a conversation among friends and how we humanize others through their own stories. So for all of this wonderful three guests and friends, how did your journey in faith and music begin? And was there a moment when you realized these two paths were inseparable in your path, in your life? Kim, why don't we start with you?
Well, growing up in the Presbyterian church, I just remember singing just all the time as a young person and singing in my house with my mom and my dad and my sister studied opera and my mom learned 3 chords on the guitar and played 1,200 songs for her elementary school class. My father was playing classical guitar. There was just always music going on. So it's been close to my heart, and
Yes.
it carries so much memory, and it teaches so much as a part of growing up. So yes, and it's been a part of my spirituality for sure, especially the historic Negro spirituals. They really are the songs that are closest to my heart.
Oh, such a blessing to being raised with musicians, surrounded by music is just, I guess, is the perfect childhood for anyone, right? I just want to make a very brief parenthesis because you remind me of my own childhood. And every single day that I came from school, walking in Mexico City, I entered the house, and the family of my mother, they used to have plantations of mangoes. So there were always crates of mangoes in the garage. So the first thing was like the aroma of the mango. And back in the living room, my father was, he loved music, and he had these collections, big collections of classical music. So I always associate classical music with mangoes. John Flaherty, what about you? When did you realize that faith, spirituality, and music were going to be a fundamental part of your life?
I think early on, too. As a child, growing up in a biracial, bicultural family in Japan, it was very interesting. We would go to Mass on Sundays and in the base chapel, and we'd sing Latin, we'd sing English. And then my mother was from the most Catholic region of Japan, which is Kyushu. And she was not Catholic before she met my dad. She was Shinto Buddhist, but she was born in a Catholic hospital in southern Japan. So that was interesting. But spirituality and faith have always been part of our family's life. We would always go to Mass on Sundays, and then we would go to the NCO club and have brunch, and it was just always, it was in the water, I would say. And I think in terms of choosing a career path this way, there's an interesting seminal moment and I can see it as vividly as I can see it right now when I was 19. And I saw Bob Hurd and the LMU choir singing at a conference with Father George Wanzer directing, and I thought, that's what I want to do.
Mm.
And I had no connection
Which
to
year
LMU.
we're talking about?
Which year?
Yeah.
It wasn't when Moses was alive, but it was
Before that.
that was a long, long time ago. I mean, I was 19, probably in the late 70s.
Got it.
Maybe, yeah, late 70s. But then, I mean, I just remember being knocked off my horse at that point.
Oh, that's beautiful. John Sebastian.
Yeah, I have some specific moments that I can point to in my journey. Unlike my colleagues here, I was raised by not very religious people, and I always joke with folks who ask me about my job that I really should not be in the role that I'm in because I had a terrible Catholic upbringing. I was from a large kind of Irish and Italian immigrant family, and I always joke with people that we went to church most weekends because somebody was being baptized or buried or married. But we didn't go to church on Sunday as a family. And so for me, so much of my own faith journey really started when I was in college in a lot of ways. And so too my journey with faith through music. I had done, a little bit of musical theater in high school and college. And my first semester as an undergrad, I was in a play. And one of my friends in the cast said, are you looking to do a little more singing because we're trying to build up the choir for the 7 p.m. Mass at the chapel? And I was, sure, I'll do that. And so I went with him and started singing really at the time that I started going to church on a regular basis and really exploring the faith that had always been sort of around me but never really part of my experience as a child. We were kind of culturally Catholic. We were in a primarily, as I said, Irish and Italian kind of community. So everybody was Catholic, but that didn't mean a whole lot for most of us. And so it was an interesting time for me to figure out what is it that this thing is that has been, part of my family history, but is not really meaningful to me. And so my journey with my own faith and my own Catholicism really started alongside my journey in music. And I should say, like my friends and dear colleagues here, I grew up in a musical household. My father was a professional musician. My parents divorced when I was very young, and my mother has many admirable qualities, but being able to carry a tune in a bucket is not one of them. And so I always, although my dad wasn't around much when I was growing up, I related to him through my own interest in music, and I was involved in music in elementary school and high school, but mostly instrumental. I didn't really sing until I got to college, and it was sort of through these encounters with others who invited me into the community, invited me into my faith, and invited me into music all at once. But simultaneous to that, and John knows this story because we have a mutual acquaintance here, as an undergraduate, we weren't allowed, those of us who were going into the humanities or the social sciences, we weren't allowed to pick a major until the end of our sophomore year. And so in our first year of college, we were just randomly assigned to an advisor who might be in any field at all. And so by dumb luck and happenstance, I wound up being assigned to a music theory professor who was related to John, as we discovered many years later. And I went to my first meeting with him, and he said, well, it looks like your schedule's pretty full right now, and I don't want to mess with it, but next semester you're singing in my choir. And I had never sung in a choir before, and I said, okay, I'll sing in your choir. I didn't think I had a choice, and I wound up taking a number of courses from him and singing in his choir. And that first semester, the things that stand out in my mind, we sang Leonard Bernstein's Chichester Psalms, and we sang the Samuel Barber Agnus Dei, which are both incredible pieces of music that remain among my favorites. But this was a kind of an entry into a new space for me to really understand the way the sacred worked through choral music, and I was kind of hooked.
Well, I love hearing you talk about college and that kind of invitation. I grew up, I was singing in the Presbyterian church when I was, but when I got to Temple University, I found the best meal on campus, which was at the Newman Center. And so I would get the meal, and I would sit right outside where they were having noon mass, and a couple of folk mass songs I would hear. And then I was humming along with them, and I was already playing guitar and whatnot. And at one point, they heard me playing guitar because I would just practice a little bit. And they said, well, why don't you come in and join the folk group? And next thing I knew, a year or so later, I was being confirmed in the Catholic Church and leading the folk group. So, that invitation definitely came, through music.
Yeah, hospitality is such an important part of it, right? People reaching out. It's not an act of belief in the first place that brings us into these spaces, but the community and the sense of belonging, which of course music is all about, right?
And food, of course.
Yes, food helps too.
Talking about music and community for Dr. Harris, for Kim Harris, your work actually, from what I understand, it blends theology and the music of liberation and justice. And so what first drew you to the spirituals and freedom songs as sacred text in their own right?
Well, thinking about those songs, I was hearing, there were starting to be, Black History Day and then Black History Week and eventually Black History Month. And I was hearing presentations on the music specifically of the Underground Railroad and how there were some of the sacred songs, the spirituals that were also used as secret code songs. And that really interested me so much, especially because I was singing some of those songs in church and never knew that there was a secret, And so I always say to people, in your hymnal, there may be a secret. And one of those songs, they'll let us break bread together on our knees and wade in the water. So to think about, now, are we allowed to sing on these mics? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's a-gonna trouble the water. So thinking about that not only is telling the story of freedom from the biblical book of Exodus, but also people like Harriet Tubman was using that to, convince people, you've got to escape and the water's going to help you. All of those things really just made me even more and more interested in the spirituals.
John Flaherty, how have your years directing worship shaped your understanding of spirituality in community?
If you were to gather several believers together, it doesn't matter what faith tradition. I'll give you an example. If you ask them to recite Psalm 91, they'd probably look at you cross-eyed. But then if you ask them to sing On Eagle's Wings, they could sing On Eagle's Wings. And so, starting out as a very young person and growing and living deeper into whatever this mystery is, I often think about how much of Scripture that I've learned through music and how much others learn their Scripture through song also. And in particular, the Psalms, right? As the deer longs, the Lord is my shepherd. If you asked people to recite those, they probably couldn't in the spoken word, but they could certainly sing versions of those songs. And then I think of the power of music, and people talk about the power of music all the time, but when you think about how many walls have been sung down, literally, through peaceful protests, but through song, when a corporate body fuses itself, amasses and joins with one voice, that's when the walls like Jericho and Gdansk in communist Poland, Berlin, and so many other, and in Ireland, the Troubles, the women, the Troubles finally began to come to an end when the women all joined their voices and marched together in song. So I think so much of us is shaped at a very deep level by poetry and art and by the sung by song. So, And then I just love to, one of the things that I love to do is to take music of different cultures, because the only way that I can get to you, Kim, or get to you, John, is by reaching out, and we reach out to one another. And, for example, if I invite the Archdiocesan African American choir to come sing in a bigger choir, and we're going to sing Wade in the Water, it's not going to be exactly as the Archdiocesan African American choir would sing it. But in that process, we become a new creation because we enter into one another's experiences. And that's the power of poetry and art and music. And, I look at that at a very deeply spiritual level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, literally singing each other's songs.
Yes.
And how important that is. I love how you said singing the walls down. I love that. I'm going to quote you on that.
It reminds me, how, there's a lot of perception, especially when you're young, that you have to go to church, and it's almost like a chore. And in fact, it's a moment of remembrance and memory, right? And music contributes to remind us who we are, where do we came from, what's our humanity, and it's that precious moment that it's like surrounded with music, and in my case, that I'm a visual artist, by images, right? Which is it allows you to recall deep inside. Talking about memories and digging from where we came from. This is for John Sebastian. Both you are a medievalist and a mission leader at LMU. How do you see this contemplative traditions of medieval sacred music connecting with today's expressions of faith?
Oh, that's fascinating. So, I mean, for me, as someone who works on past expressions of spirituality, that also is part of the journey I was alluding to earlier. I think as a kind of an 18-year-old arriving at college whose experience in church had been in a parish that on Sundays the average age of the congregation was 147. That was only because I was present and sort of lowering it from 155. I had always felt as a young person that there wasn't a lot in that space for me. It didn't feel like I was the audience for what that experience was meant to be. And so arriving in college and discovering that, there was a way of engaging and that there were, priests in the world who could actually deliver a homily of interest to a teenager was a kind of a revelation in its own right. And by, again, sort of dumb luck and chance, I wound up in my first year of college taking a course on Dante. And that kind of blew my head open, as we read our way through the entirety of the comedy, and I thought, where is this vivid imagination in the church that I've experienced as a child? Where is this questioning in the church that I experienced as a child? Where is this journeying that I experienced? Everything seemed so sort of pat and kind of boxed in, and here's the faith, and here's what you believe, and here's how you comport yourself in line with it. And what I saw in Dante was this wild visual imagery, this just extravagant poetry, the politics, the history, the questions, the disobedience, right? The unruliness of it all. And I just felt like, whoa, there's a whole story here that I don't know anything about. And so I got really interested in what earlier spiritualities looked like, and not only Dante, but then, reading Julian of Norwich and some of the other great women mystics and spiritual guides, Catherine of Siena, Hildegard of Bingen. All of these people kind of became my companions as I tried to understand where my faith came from, but also to understand why we seem to have lost so much of that vividness and imagination in my experience of church as church. And so for me, connecting with those past past spiritual authorities and practitioners and artists, and that was really key for me. I grew up going to a church that was, built in the 50s or 60s or something, and you can imagine the aesthetic, and it wasn't exactly compelling. And engaging with this art again with the vividness of the imagination, including the music as well, and starting to understand that the semester after I took the Dante class, I took a course in medieval music, which again kind of knocked my head open as I was, understanding what I had understood to be, like Gregorian chant, this sort of uninteresting, kind of boring, unfamiliar, unsingable sort of thing, itself became an entry into a way of thinking and understanding the movement from, singing quasi una voce with a singular voice in the church, that there had to be just one line, to the radicalness of suddenly introducing polyphony. And what does it mean to be in a space where we're supposed to be governed by a kind of a univocity of thinking and belief, to now have two different lines singing in parallel to one another, and then, heaven forbid, crossing each other, and creating harmonies that were unexpected, and the multiplication of voices, and then bringing instruments into the church. This recognition that God could be celebrated in so many different ways, and that our ideas could evolve over time. That was really fascinating to me, because the idea of a church that evolved over time, that developed in response to the realities around it, that grew as art changed. None of that had been my experience as a kid going to this kind of bland, boxy church with 155-year-olds in it. And so for me, as you say, connecting with that memory that I didn't know was my memory to connect with, but was the memory of my faith, was really about trying to yank that memory kicking and screaming into the present a little bit, to say, wait, what's here that we've lost track of? Why don't we still talk about some of these people? And one of my sort of proudest teaching moments, I would say, was when I was teaching a course on medieval women writers, and I was teaching Julian of Norwich, and I was teaching what Julian has to say about sin, that God doesn't mind when we sin, because God gets all excited because it's an opportunity to reach out a helping hand and say, come back. Like, you want a hand, and I've got a hand to lend you. And I had a first year student who came up to me in the class. She'd been very quiet and shy up to that point in time, and she said, how come nobody ever taught me about this? And I said, let me tell you all about it. And I thought, here's an opportunity to accompany a young person on the same journey that I kind of fumbled my way through, to say, what have we lost about our own tradition, including our musical idioms. And so I've spent a lot of my time singing in choirs where we really do kind of the whole canon of Christian music from the beginning until last Tuesday, and connecting with those different moments. And John, when you talked about Psalms earlier, I mean, I immediately went to Sicut Cervus and Howel's like as a heart. Different versions of that psalm that speak to different moments in different ways, and those are two settings of that text that I've sung many times, both of them, and near and dear to my heart. And if the listeners don't know Herbert Howell's "Like as a Heart," go listen to it. It's a great piece of music right now.
Or you can sing it first.
I don't have enough. I don't have enough choir members here, but I think, seeing how those same texts pop up over and over and over again, but get reimagined for new listeners, new believers, new prayers, is so powerful for me. And I think finding ways to dig back into that tradition from time to time, while also recognizing how we adapt for new communities and new needs, is one of the beauties of having a faith tradition that is so ancient, but is also always reimagining itself into the moment, responding to the signs of the times and the needs of the people.
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about people like Julian of Norwich. And, my person is Teresa of Jesus, Teresa of Avila. And, I see her with a tambourine. And, knowing that, she was singing out of Spanish traditions, but in my African-American tradition, I'm busy singing with a tambourine. And now this will crack you all up. Part of why I even thought about becoming Catholic was from watching the movie The Singing Nun.
There we go.
And, she had her guitar and she brought her guitar with her, and she said, "Now, I named my guitar Adele, and so now the guitar is Sister Adele." And I, as a young person, I named my guitar Teresa, and I took a course in Christian mysticism. And when the list came out of who we could write about, I didn't recognize any names except Teresa. I said, "Oh, Teresa. Well, I know that name." And so then talk about vivid imagination and the way the way she spoke and wrote, and so then that's part of that journey that brought me into the church. But yes, Teresa and her tambourine, and me and mine.
There you go. That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. One of the North Stars of the Academy of Catholic Thought and Imagination is bringing forward the importance of the idea of the sacramentality of the arts, right, which has been always one of our priorities, as you know, and it reminded me again of the creative process itself, right? How the creative process is embedded into this spirituality. And John Flaherty, at the beginning of this episode, he said about his upbringing in two different traditions, right? And which is my case when we have talked about, like, my mom was Buddhist, my father was Catholic, devout Catholic. And and I have talked about this experience many times, but please indulge me again, is that when I was 8, my mother told me, "Hey, it was my birthday," and she told me, "Come to my room, I'm going to give you a gift." And then I came up, and then she said, "I'm going to teach you how to breathe." And that, in so many ways, it reminds me of what you're doing in terms of music that has to deal with the power of breathing and the power of how breathing takes you into contemplation and makes you understand your inner rhythms and just builds a channel directly with the divine. So my question to the three of you is, what is your creative process when preparing for liturgy or performance, and how do prayer, study, and artistic intuition interact?
The very first question I ask is, who is the assembly? Who is gathered here? Because that begins to shape what you do, what your cultural expressions are, what music you choose, what prayers you choose, and what languages you actually proclaim and pray in. And I always look at language as an opportunity for hospitality. If there are monolingual Spanish speakers, then those in power making this prayer service come together can do a lot by relinquishing some of that power and having Spanish be part of that prayer service, so that those who only speak Spanish can enter the prayer themselves. But I'm not going to proclaim a reading in Japanese if I'm the only Japanese person in the room, because that doesn't welcome anyone into the prayer. It becomes something else.
And one of the things that I do along with that is also to think, what are the readings? What are the messages and themes that we're thinking about in terms of the prayer service? And sometimes I'll just sit and read the readings and things start to sing inside of me. There's something about the scriptural text that makes things sing in me, and I'll just find myself humming and thinking about it and then seeing where it goes from there. Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear you proclaim a text in Japanese, John. I'm looking for that. I can't wait. And it's interesting because there are times when I think we might proclaim or sing in a language and we don't even know who's in the room. And I've had I had a dear colleague that burst into tears after a group sang a song from Jamaica, and none of us knew that she had Jamaican roots. We never knew. She had brown skin. We all had brown skin. We said, and that taught me such an incredible lesson about we don't always know who's in the room. And so that hospitality piece.
Say your story about learning how to breathe is what I'm connecting with here as we think about this. I joke with people sometimes that I sing in choirs because it's sort of sanctioned, organized yelling. Like at the end of a long day, I can go someplace and it's safe to take a deep breath and just let it all out, right? But the breathing part is the necessary first step. And going all the way back to Genesis, right? We're just a pile of mud until God breathes on us, breathes into us, and that flow of breath in and out, the Spirit, is what makes us human, what makes us alive, and what connects us to the divine. And I think, the act of singing sacred texts is an opportunity also to just re-engage with that sort of fundamental reality of that breath moving in and out of us that keeps us alive, that keeps us connected to the divine, and without which we're just a kind of a pile of ooze again, right? So when I am able to be attentive enough, for me that kind of that breathing is the key part of all of it, and I think that's what's so wonderful about singing sacred music or singing any kind of music. But for me, particularly singing sacred music, I have to be in my body to do that well, right? Which means I got to turn my brain off for a little while. And if I'm using my brain, it's because I'm paying attention to the words, I'm paying attention to the music, but the background noise shuts off for a little while. It's such a totally immersive experience. It re-engages me in my body. It re-engages me with that breathing, with the breath, with the divine, with the Spirit blowing in and out, and gives clarity and focus for the duration of whatever it is that I'm singing, and hopefully for a few minutes beyond that, right? That I can stay in that space even after the notes are done ringing out, to be reminded of that connection of the breath, of the Spirit, of all that is sort of life-giving in those moments. I think that breathing part is so important for me. My dear liturgist friends are thinking sort of more broadly and more beautifully. And for me, it's just, gosh, like it's the one time of day where I can say, wait a minute, I'm here, I'm alive.
Yes.
The Spirit is still flowing in and out. Let me take this moment to engage.
So, Dr. Harris, welcome table Mass of Spirituals, from what I understand, reimagines the Eucharistic liturgy through the Black Catholic experience. How do you balance historical authenticity with contemporary relevance?
Well, when I think about the songs, because it's the official text of the Eucharistic liturgy, and what I balance that with are the historic Negro spirituals, so the melodies and the meanings. And so it's all carried together. So if we're singing the glory to God in the highest. And I think about the way enslaved and free African Americans, some who were Catholic and many who were not Catholic, were singing about, Jesus, the glory of Jesus, and thinking about the glory of Jesus, helping them to get to their freedom. It all comes together. So that was what I was seeking to do. And it's amazing to be with Black Catholics as we sing that welcome table Mass of Spirituals, and to be with the wider Black community, and to be with people who are not part of our community, because when we sing that official text, and then we also sing these songs of our ancestors, it all connects together.
Yes.
And so so I love to get to do that, and and I worked with actually Roger Holland, now Dr. Roger Holland, and we were both at Union Theological Seminary in New York City.
Yes.
And singing together and thinking together, what of those spirituals? And I think one of my favorites is that one of the memorial acclamations where, the words talk about freedom. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that, I said, well, the spiritual that needs to go with that needs to be about freedom. And that was an easy melding and marriage, thinking, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. So that's the source material. But then to think about that memorial acclamation that says, save us, Savior, save us, Savior, save us, Savior of the world. For by your cross and resurrection you have set us free. And when those come together for me, that brings in my ancestors and brings in the people that are in the room, and we're all looking for that freedom, that spiritual freedom. And, so I love getting to bring those things together.
So much healing, right, in this process. Oh, yes. Thank you for that. John Flaherty. So you have written music and guided large congregations through worship at events like the LA Religious Education Congress. So how do you help thousands of voices become one act of prayer?
Well, as the director and the one who plans all of that, it's wonderful to have someone like Kim Harris animating and leading an assembly like this. Because there are some people, and Kim is one of them. I mean, I've said this many times, Kim, she could get the chairs to sing. And there are some people, and Kim, you're one of those people who, by virtue of how you invite people into who you are, you can get an entire arena to sing and pray as one. And so, it's you put all of these pieces together, and then part of putting the pieces together is finding the right people for that moment in time and in that place. And it might be a completely different person or different set of people in another setting. And sometimes, I've directed this particular conference for several years. Sometimes it's different year to year, and it evolves, and it continues to evolve. I loved what you said about, the church evolving, John, through the centuries. I mean, God is still speaking. The Holy Spirit is still moving, right?
Yes. Yeah.
This Holy Spirit didn't stop speaking to musicians in the church in the 9th century.
Yes.
Or the 15th century, or, the 19th or 20th. So it's how we're listening.
So my question to John Sebastian is, you have actually sung in very well-known choirs, important choirs, perform at Sacred Heart Chapel. So what does participating musically in the liturgy teach you about the relationship between the intellect and devotion?
You can appreciate the transporting effect of music not understanding a thing about how music actually works. Or you can look at someone like Palestrina with a musical mind and understand the thoughtfulness that goes into constructing a piece like Sicut Cervus. And I think that's the beauty of it. It speaks to the heart. It speaks to the mind. However you show up, you can be engaged in music in that way. It's a sort of wonderfully democratic art form in that sense. You can just like it because you like it. You can just be moved by it because you've heard something you've never heard before. Or you can, dig in and really understand what some of our great composers are doing in creating new sonic experiences, in inciting each other in creative and imaginative ways, and borrowing and imitating and all of that. But you don't need to know that that's what's going on in the background, right? You can simply appreciate it for what it is. So I think that's really the importance of it. And I think good church music, to John's point, as you mentioned earlier, is music that uplifts the congregation and the community in prayer, right? It's not performance. Right. We're not there for applause at the end. One of the things that I love about singing in a choir in the first place is that it's the only true team sport, right? Like, I mean, if you're playing basketball, you want want a LeBron on your team, right? You want a Kobe on your team. You want the person who's going to be the superstar. You want Michael Jordan on your team.
Yeah.
And you're okay being the third or fourth best player if those are the guys who are leading your roster. You don't want superstars in a choir, right? Nobody should be standing out any more than anybody else. We function best when there's a kind of a unity, right? And everybody is in perfect balance and everyone is in perfect harmony. And I think, for me, that's the beauty of that kind of singing, is that it requires us to kind of suppress ourselves, not in a negative way, but for the sake of the community, right? Either we're all here together or we're not a community, right? And so I think music that invites us to recognize our role in creating an uplifting, prayerful experience for everyone who's there, musicians and non-musicians alike, whether it's very contemporary music or very old music or a mix of all of the above. At the end of the day, it's the line that's often attributed to Augustine. That's not really Augustine, but nothing that's attributed to some person from long ago is ever their actual saying. But when we sing, we pray twice, right? And what does that mean for the community, to invite them to really understand the music as a form of prayer, as a moment of engaging? And there's something inherently sort of divine about music, right? It's communication that's different from what we're doing right here. This is very human. This is what we do in our everyday. But when we start to pray to God, not in the way we talk to one another, although God loves that too, but really in this other way, through song, through this embodiment, through sound, through the blending of voices. John and Kim and I can do something together that we can't do individually, right? The human instrument, the voice, is different from the piano or the guitar. I can't sing more than one note at a time. Maybe some people can pull that off, but I can't, right? And so I need them in order to make that layered kind of textured music. And I think that's kind of the beauty of only being able to sing one note at a time, is in order to make something still more beautiful than what I can do alone, I need all of you.
Talking about harmony and how we need others, and this is a question for all of you, is how can sacred music bridge divides such as racial, generational, or theological within the church today?
Yeah, I think a part of it for me is that, first of all, inviting people to know who they are and what their heritage is. And the songs, I was just writing about this, thinking about stories of Sister Thea Bowman. And when she was 15 years old and traveled, as a young African-American from Canton, Mississippi, God help her, right, to La Crosse, Wisconsin, once again, God help her.
Yeah.
But she said, she was joining the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration and experiencing racism and prejudice and making lifelong friends all at the same time. And as a lonely 15-year-old, she would sing spirituals to herself for healing and consolation. Well, fast forward to when she starts teaching, young kids in La Crosse, Wisconsin, so there she is teaching the kids, and some of the parents were saying, there's a black teacher, we don't want a black teacher for our kids, she went through all of that. But then the young people started singing the spirituals she was teaching, learning about a whole other group of people that they, most of them don't know anything about, and learning and singing and being excited about it. And then, servant of God, Thea Bowman, who on her way toward sainthood, goes back 1,000 miles south to Canton, Mississippi, and her students now, African-American students, at a time when churches are being bombed and, all the danger of the civil rights movement. And how could she teach them math and science and English?
Right.
And what she did was to also have them sing the spirituals for healing and consolation. There's so much that the songs can do, both within our community and beyond our own communities.
One of the things that I always, thank you, Kim, that was so beautiful. It made me think of something else. When people come to me and ask me for advice about how to put all of these, we've got a growing fill in the blank Igbo community in our parish, which is one of the dialects that come from Nigeria. We've got an emerging Filipino community. We've got a growing Polish community in this church. We want to do the Easter Vigil together. And so how do we do that? The very first thing that I say is don't start with the work. Don't start with that. Have a picnic. Have a potluck.
Food.
Everyone play games together. Get to know one another. Invite all the choirs and all the constituencies and sing songs. Some religious, some sacred, but some secular. Teach each other the songs that your families sing in and out of church, within worship, but also at home.
Say, just because our topic is music, when you asked that question, my mind went immediately to elementary school. We had in elementary school a Jewish music teacher, Gloria Zittman, who taught us every song under the sun that you could imagine from every tradition imaginable. And as like an 8-year-old, I didn't know where these songs were coming from or whose songs they were or whose songs they weren't, but I certainly know more songs for Hanukkah than most people at this stage of my life, because she taught us that, and that was fine. And every year we did this Christmas concert for a room full of Catholics and sang 5 Hanukkah songs. And I appreciate now, so many years after the fact, she was trying to do something. She was trying to make sure that we all took time out to appreciate, our differences and where those things helped create a common human family.
Thanks so much. So I have one last question for each one of you. Let me start with Dr. Kim Harris. Kim, you often connect the songs of the civil rights movement to liturgy. So how can music continue to animate social justice movements today?
I think that the way that music can do that is that when people get together, and unfortunately there are many times when situations and events call us together, and it might be a whole group of Catholics that say we're going to have a mass in honor of someone that was killed, or it might be a group that is meeting in a secular kind of situation, and all different faith traditions are there, and it's not even an overtly spiritual gathering, and yet music can bring us together to think about the fact that you don't want to hear 20 speeches in a row, or you don't want to hear people that they're just chanting and chanting and chanting and chanting. That music is a part of what can bring unity with a group of people. Music can connect us to ancestors that worked for freedom, and music can bring us towards some hopes that we want to work for freedom. And they don't necessarily have to be songs from the civil rights movement, though those, of course, are my favorite, and They have many, many histories. But let's say if there's a vigil and people are trying to figure out what are we going to do next, you're not going to, first of all, we're not going to write up and print out song sheets. We're going to just stand there together and sing "Be Not Afraid," and that might be what we have to sing as we're marching down the street and we're not sure. So that's what I want music to always do, to be a way of bringing us together, to be a way of inspiring people and connecting them to ancestors. And like I said, my go-to is always songs of the civil rights movement, many of which, of course, came from the spirituals. That's where I usually go, but that isn't where we have to go. Where we need to be is literally conspiring, our favorite word, right?
There it is.
Breathing together.
Yes.
And bringing the music into the situation.
Well, thank you for that. Mm-hmm. John Flaherty. As an educator and father, what role does music play in forming the spiritual imagination of young people?
Oh, I think John answered that question perfectly. Another example is, we all were assigned to read To Kill a Mockingbird in the 5th grade. I thought it was a good book, but I had no idea the depth of what was the story that was being told until much later on in our lives, in my life. I think it's really important to teach children music that they can grow into. So when you're forming a children's choir to sing at Sunday Mass, it can't be all kiddie music. In fact, very little of it should be kiddie music, because what that does, that experience, then it infantilizes the parents and the adults in the assembly on a Sunday rather than elevates everyone else. Now, okay, so, my granddaughter's 3. She's singing Bluey and all of these pieces of music now. So, and I get that, when you're with little children and it's all little children, you want to sing music that they can access. When we begin to look at Sunday worship and the entire community, we want to make sure that we're feeding our children a diet of music that's musically sound, theologically sound, liturgically sound, that they can grow into, so that, when they run and encounter certain obstacles or challenges in their life, whether they're 10 or 13 or certainly 16 or 17, they have something to draw on, just as you talked about the young Thea Bowman, right? They have something to draw on that's substantive, that can carry them through. And I always say we have to be very mindful of the music and the words that we place in people's mouths, because whatever they place in their mouths, they take into their body.
Right.
And whatever they take into their body, they become.
Yes.
So
beautiful.
And is it okay if we still hold on to that when we're 67 and 68 years old? Those songs, we go back to those songs.
Yeah. It's like scents, right? It's like a scent will transport you to a moment. Music does the same thing.
Is there a particular song with all your years of experience that actually connects with younger people immediately? Is there a song that you or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. One of my favorite stories was teaching some kids "Hold Us in Your Mercy," which is a penitential litany, and it was written by Rory Cooney and Gary Daigle. It actually happened to be it was written here at LMU when they were here for a conference. But I taught them this song, the kids this song, because they said, "Mr. Flaherty, do we have to do all of that old music? Why can't we do something new?" So I took this piece of music and, I said, "You got a drum set, you got a bass guitar, you got a guitar. Let's start putting some rhythm to it, So we put a rock beat to it. Doom, doom, dad. Oh, Mr. Flaherty, this is so great. I'm so happy we don't have to sing any of that really old music, Marty Haugen or something. That ancient music." Yeah. Well, so we went through this whole thing, and I said, okay, these are the verses. You rap these verses. You don't even need to sing them. How are you going to make that poetry so that we can do this like hip hop? And they did it. And then I said, okay, let's take, they were really into it. They loved it. And then I said, take out these music books and open to page whatever it was. I said, let's sing this song. And it was Parce Domine, Parce Populo Tuo, Ne in Eternum iras claris nobis. So, which is what the penitential litany was based on. He said, "You tricked us." And I said, and then I taught them a little bit about 8th and 9th century chant. I said, it's timeless, right?
Yes. Thank you for that.
So,
And what's that psalm that says, "You've duped us"?
Yeah.
You've duped us,
duped me,
Lord.
Deuteronomy.
Lord. Yeah.
Deuteronomy. Yeah.
Deuteronomy.
So last but not least, John Sebastian.
So much pressure.
Yeah. How does LMU's mission of the service of faith and promotion of justice resonate in the way we experience sacred music on campus?
Oh, that's really beautiful. Well, I think, one of my functions, I think, in the role that I have here at the university, going back really to what we talked about earlier in hospitality, is to invite people to find a way into our mission that makes sense to them, right? I think we try to avoid being overly dogmatic about this and in all meanings of that word, that if you're here, you must believe this or you must act in this way. I think what we try to share with people is the richness and variety of our faith tradition and all of the ways that that shows up in a person's life, whether that's through acts of service or activism on behalf of justice or participation in the liturgy or in all of these different ways. And so, I think as we think about, right, that mission here, it's an invitation to say, find your way into this, find the resonance, and there's a good sort of musical term, right? Find where you're vibrating at the same frequency as our mission. And for some people that may be through song, right? I mean, we think about the sort of the transcendentals that we go back to and over again, truth, good, and beauty, right? And beauty is a way in for so many people, right? It's that experience of wonder, that thing that transports us outside of ourselves to say, well, I'm seeing reality in a way that I don't see it every day. This is truly beautiful. This is taking me beyond. It's taking me to where God is. So I think, as we talk about our mission, as we talk about the commitment to the service of faith and promotion of justice, as we think about music and art and all of these things, I think whatever is a way in for our students, for our faculty, and for our staff, to find that resonance, to find that place where their own soul is vibrating at the same frequency as that of other people around here, of the mission, of the whole history of our faith tradition, or of other faith traditions that people bring with them to make up this beautiful community that we are. I think all of that's important here. And I think whatever we can do to send those kind of sound waves out to people so that they can kind of hear that frequency and vibe with it, I think that's what we're about here, right? We don't want to tell anybody what to believe or how to believe. We want to show them what it means to believe in all of the different ways that we do here and invite people to find those points of connection. I often talk with people on campus and say, it's everybody's mission is everyone's responsibility here. Nobody gets a free pass. Everybody has to think about where they connect up to this. But the flip side of that is the mission is only as vibrant, as meaningful as the least of those connections, right? So if we don't have the whole community bought into mission, then we're missing something, right? The mission isn't complete if you're not part of it, right? Then we're missing a piece. We're missing you. We're missing what you uniquely bring, and the mission isn't fully what it can be if everybody isn't contributing from their own unique experience, their own giftedness, their own story, their own history. We need all of those pieces to come together here to create that community. And I think at the end of the day, that's what makes this a really special and wonderful place.
Thank you so much. So I just want to thank you again for this beautiful, wonderful, enlightening conversation. And what I take out of this time with you, which I will share forever because you're just like guiding lights in our community, is that music and faith is related to hopefulness. And hopefulness, it's something that I read recently, is not neutral, it's adversarial, because it's the soul of the warrior. And I think that in so many ways, what you do with music is adversarial, because it brings back what is really important within us. So it creates a feeling to stand up. And I want to thank you again, Dr. Kim Harris, Dr. John Sebastian, John Flaherty. This has been a fantastic episode. I'm José García Moreno. This episode was produced by Alexander Thurner, and I hope to see you once more again in the future.